When I was a kid, I think the first time I went to a game, it was a Boy Scout trip, and I became a huge fan of the Comets. And this had been 74, 75 season, somewhere in that area. And I loved the goalie. His name was Jim Park. And Jim was an awesome goalie for the Comets, especially during that they had a very competitive season going against the Syracuse Blazers and Johnstown and all of that back there in those old days of Comets hockey. And Jim Park, Stephanie was able to track him down. He lives in Canada. He's alive and well and on the line with us right now. Jim, good morning.
Good morning, Bill. How are you?
It's like talking to one of my childhood heroes, you understand.
Oh, that's crazy.
So I don't know if you've followed any of what's gone on here in Utica, but there's been a huge resurgence in hockey now here in the city of Utica.
Well, I have. I've been back for a couple of the charity and alumni golf tournaments over the past few years, and of course I'm well aware of what's going on in the American Hockey League and so on, and I'm so thrilled that they got hockey back and they refurbished the arena and things are going well. So I think that's just fantastic for all the people there in Utica.
So in my mind, and I didn't do any I couldn't find the stats anywhere, but in my mind, I remember you guys during one of those seasons maybe missed a spot going off into the playoffs or lost in the playoffs. I just remember a shot of you in the newspaper just standing dejected in front of the goal, in front of the net. Do you remember, do I have my facts right, or did I adjust them over the years?
Well, I would think that would have been after the loss to Syracuse in the playoffs.
It was a Syracuse loss, yep.
If I had to guess, that's what I would say, yes.
And I remember the next morning, and it was either the Daily Press or the Observer-Dispatch, the photo of you, and it was just totally dejected, as you might expect. But man, I mean, those were great days for hockey in Utica.
They were. It was a lot of fun. The people enjoyed coming out. They were great to us, and a lot of fun to play there at that time.
So also during that era, somewhere in that era, I believe the movie Slapshot was being filmed, some of which was done in Utica, some in Syracuse, but Utica players. I remember a controversy over players not showing up for a game or maybe for practice because they wanted to be in the movie. A, did you get in the movie? And B, do I remember correctly there?
Well, the only thing I could think about that would be is when they were taking a bunch of mug shots to pass on to Paul Newman's brother, who was picking out who was going to be in the movie, and so everybody was making their craziest faces and everything else to try and impress upon him how nuts they were, so that they could get a spot in the movie. But other than that, I'm not sure about the practice thing. As far as myself, I took a different route. I went to the airport, volunteered to go to the airport to pick Paul Newman's brother up, and so I could try and sneak my way in that way. And as it worked out, I was given a part, but I got called up to the Indianapolis Racers towards the end of the season and in the playoffs, and so I couldn't do it.
And because of that, you didn't get in. Wow.
That's right.
Well, hey, you got to follow your career. That's key.
So speaking of all the different teams you've played for, how does Utica stack up against all of them? I mean, we have some of the young players on the Comets always say the environment's great, the city's great. What are your feelings on that?
Well, it's a great area to play. It's a beautiful area of New York and so on. I certainly had a great time playing there. I mean, the weather wasn't always the greatest, as far as the amount of snow you got and the traveling on the buses and things like that. But that's hockey. That's what it was like when you were a kid playing, and I loved it. I loved every minute of playing there.
It's funny because we, of course, with Rob Esch, who I'm sure was inspired by local hockey here as well, went on to play in the NHL and the Olympics and came back here to build a team and bring hockey back, and that plays a big role. Local ownership plays such a big role. How was it for? The move was from Clinton to Utica. You were a little later in that process, but
yes.
How was that transition? Do you recall?
Well, as you say, I was a little bit after it, and so I wouldn't really know too much about that. We practiced a lot in Clinton in the days that I was there and so on, but I think it was probably just the arena was much newer in Utica, held more people, and I'm sure that's why that decision was made to move there. And I have to add one thing in. Robert Esch came to my goalie school when he was a young fella.
Wow.
Up here in Toronto.
That is, I was going to bring that up.
Wow.
That's what do you do today, and you have a goalie school?
Well, I don't. I retired a couple of years ago. Ran it for 28 years.
Wow.
Up here in Toronto, working with all the young kids. So I was very fortunate that I got to carry on the thing I enjoy doing most in life. And actually, even though I retired, I still work with several young teams with the young goalies up here in Toronto. So, yes, and I was back to see, as I mentioned, coming back to the golf tournament, and I saw Robert. And we got a chance to chat a little bit. It had been quite a few years since I'd seen him, and so that was a lot of fun.
We're talking to Jim Park. He was a goalie with the Mohawk Valley Comets back in the mid-'70s. You left and then came back, I believe, for another season after that. What were some of the names that you remember from then? Anything you can recall?
Well, certainly, yes. Some of the big scorers on the team, Bob Murray, Peter Marin, Doug Brindley. It's interesting. Each year for the last 2 or 3 years, it actually started when we came back to the golf tournament, but John Cook, Rich Pumple, and Peter Dunbar and I traveled down to the golf tournament together. Last couple of years we haven't been able to make it, but what we have done is we've had a weekend up north. Peter Dunbar and his wife run a bed and breakfast in a place called Collingwood, which is up in cottage country.
Wow.
A couple hours north of here, and we go up for the weekend with our wives, and we spend it together up there, kind of going over old war stories and things like that, and so that's been a lot of fun as well.
Hey, how accurate or inaccurate or ironic was the movie Slapshot?
Well, it was incredible. It certainly documented a lot of what was going on in hockey, and it was funny because I was just reading something the other day where somebody was comparing it to some of the other sports movies and talking about how it was a load of crap, and I can tell you that while there are some exaggerations in there where the guy goes down the bench slapping everybody in the face with his hockey stick, which never happened, there was a lot of things in that movie that very much did happen, some of which were games that I participated in, so it really was a pretty accurate portrayal of what hockey was like at that time and how different everything is now.
Do you remember the name of the? I bring this up because I used to listen to WIBX every morning to hear, or every night to hear these to hear the games. Do you remember the name of the announcer, the radio announcer that called the games? And that's a tough question.
He's doing San Diego
Chargers?
San Diego football, and I've got his number right in here. Lee Hamilton.
Lee Hamilton.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I became a broadcast fan listening to where I really wanted to go into radio broadcasting, listening to those games. He was one of my favorite ever, and that's awesome. Anyway, great memories from back then, and to find you, Jim, really, really cool. I never got to talk to you when I was a fan, but to talk to you now is awesome. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Well, I really appreciate that. That's very flattering. And, Bill, I really appreciate you having me on. Thanks very much.
Well, maybe we'll see you when you come down for another event down here at some point in the future.
Sounds great.
All right, good deal. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
That's Jim Park. In my mind, legendary goalie for the Mohawk Valley Comets.